Good morning, CLC. I invite you now, in this moment, to just take this time for yourself. If you feel so inclined, go ahead and take a nice, deep, cleansing breath in, breathing in all the cool, calm air around you. And as you release the breath, allow all that no longer serves you to just wash away. Let Spirit take the guide. If you feel so inclined, go ahead and take another nice, deep, cleansing breath in, breathing in the love and light that surrounds you. And as you release the breath, allow your body to just relax in this moment. And allow your mind to be here now. Universal love enfolds me. Universal wisdom inspires me. Universal spirit enlightens me. Universal power encircles me. I am one, and all is well. As we begin this inner healing process, let me invite you to relax in quiet confidence, opening yourself to the miracle-working higher power. Now symbolize the unity of your thinking and feeling nature by touching your chest with your hand, and let my words act as your own for your own inner healing, acceptance, and receptivity. I acknowledge that there is a power, intelligence, and wisdom greater than my own. I am in the midst of it, and it is in the midst of me, sensitive and responsive to my every thought, word, action, and feeling. I now make this true for myself by saying aloud, I acknowledge. Acknowledging this higher power working through my life, I admit that I am personally responsible for solving my own problems while being guided and assisted by something greater than myself. As I am ready to surrender the conflicts of my ego to the wisdom of this infinite presence, I simply speak these words: I surrender. Knowing that forgiveness is the key to unconditional love and the feeling of heaven, I now unconditionally forgive anyone and everyone who has ever injured me in any way, real or imagined. And I now forgive myself for all of my mistaken judgments and their resulting actions. From my deepest level of understanding, I now say, I forgive. Realizing that I continually experience the effects of my own thinking, I now choose to allow this higher power to recreate me deeply, filling my mind with thoughts that are only positive, constructive, loving, and beautiful. I call upon this divine inflow by stating aloud, I choose. I now center upon that one special idea that I'm willing to accept as real for me in this coming week. Visualizing that idea as already acted upon and brought to pass. In seeing my idea become a fact of my experience, I enjoy the happiness and peace of my thought fulfilled and gratefully speak these words. I accept. Knowing that I have an everlasting place in the midst of the power that sustains all creation, as well as the support of all those around me. I allow myself to relax in the peace of fulfillment and gratitude and say, I release. Now, in my mind's eye, I envision the presence of someone near and dear to me. This can be a friend, a family member, a teacher or mentor, someone who has touched my life in deep and loving ways. Someone who may not be physically present in this room or on this planet anymore. I turn to that image in my mind's eye and say, I'm grateful for the good in your life. Now I open my eyes, turn to the world around me, and joyfully speak to anyone who is physically present in the room or virtually on this broadcast, and share in confidence and gratitude in saying, I'm grateful for the good in your lives.
I was saying that I feel like Jesse up here. I'm going to come up here and unload my pockets. Except for the fact that there is literally nothing in my pockets. I just came up here with a bunch of stuff in my hands. And, okay, so I'm going to ask you guys to take one nice deep breath for me. Mostly because I need it. Jesse does not take much time off. And I wasn't expecting to do 2 weeks in a row. And here I am. And it is an honor and a privilege because I get to kick off the new series. Do you guys read the emails when he sends them out about what the series is? Okay. I don't always until after I've heard the first talk because I use that to create the YouTube, what I put on the YouTube. And so I was like, well, I guess I better go read it this time. What are we going to talk about for the rest of the month? Okay. So I actually copied it and pasted it in my notes. So the theme of the month is Materializing the Spiritual. It's a study in contrasts, okay? So January is back to the basics. We go right back to the basics and we talk about the basics. And it's always a good review. No matter how long you have been in the science of mind, January is a good review. Because you're always going to take something to a deeper level. I've heard it on the surface, and this time, and you just pull it a little deeper each time. And then February was like, okay, we're going to start practicing this now. But that's what we do for the rest of the year, right? So I think the last time that Jesse was here, he made this comment. Our philosophy can be said to be simple, but not simplistic. So everything's not one way or another. And often it is a paradox, which makes our head spin, and it doesn't feel good. And then we have to sit with that and go, all right, but what does it mean? And what am I supposed to do with this? Well, today we're going to study contrast. The title is literally just Self-Esteem and Humility. Do those two words go together? Maybe. Maybe. So let's define our terms. I literally looked it up. Does anybody still own a dictionary, or do we all just Google it? I do own a dictionary. I don't know where it is. So I Googled it, and Merriam-Webster, thank God, has a really good online dictionary. So self-esteem, it is a noun, and it means a confidence and a satisfaction in oneself. Okay? You knew that, right? Humility, also a noun. Freedom from pride or arrogance. Were you expecting that? So just out of curiosity, I looked up, okay, wait, no, back up. Are you aware in the Science of Mind textbook, there's a glossary in the back? Okay? So I looked up self-esteem in the glossary. Guess what? It's not in there. But humility is. So let's talk about what Ernest said about humility in the back. And here's where I begin the quotes, but this is literally in the Science of Mind text. Because he quotes Emerson in his definition. So, in the glossary, true humility is not self-abasement, but rather that attitude which Emerson tells us is willing to get its bloated nothingness out of the way of the divine circuits. It is an intelligent recognition that the whole is greater than any one of its parts. Then he quotes Exodus, "Stand and watch the sure salvation of the Lord." And I'm like, one, he didn't tell me where that was from, so I had to Google it. And then two, I was like, okay, but what has that got to do with humility? Let's go back to the Emerson quote. Emerson is not my favorite, never has been, although I'm learning to love Emerson. Okay, I'm learning to like Emerson. I don't know that I'm ever going to love Emerson. But you hear that quote about getting our bloated nothingness out of the way. Have you ever heard of the divine circuits? That gets left out a lot. And 'cause he's always talking about our bloated nothingness, and I'm like, it just conjures up things that I don't want to think about. But getting our bloated nothingness out of the way of the divine circuits. When I heard the divine circuits, I went, oh, I understand this quote now. It's partly about getting out of our own way. And partly about getting out of Spirit's way. Because we ask for Spirit. We ask Spirit for a whole lot of things, right? And then we say, but. Or we say, it's got to be this way. You know, I want this house on this corner with this paint job. Oh, no, that would be a car, wouldn't it? Okay, point being, we start to limit Spirit. And so some of humility is about that, about not limiting Spirit. It's about getting our bloated nothingness, because sometimes when we ask for things, we don't know what we're talking about. We don't know what we're asking for. We don't know what we're asking for on a deep level. We know what we're asking for on a surface level. And so I have a Monday through Friday mortgage paying job. I love my Monday through Friday mortgage paying job. Okay? But sometimes people will come in and they say, I want this. And I ask them a couple of questions. And I go, well, okay. One, what you're asking for doesn't do what you think it's going to do. And two, you're taking a medication that contraindicates that. But if you want something that will do this, let me suggest this. So they walk out having bought something completely different than what they came in for. But they still are going to get the result that they came in for. Those are those divine circuits that we want to get our bloated nothingness out of the way of. Sometimes what we think we want ain't what we need. I'm not going to quote the Rolling Stones, even though I just did, right? Okay. Now, I also pulled up the concordance, which is a big word for a little book. You ever seen the concordance for the Bible? Whoa, those things are huge. But the concordance, you can look up any word in the concordance and see how many times in the Science of Mind text Ernest mentioned it. Do you know how many times he mentioned self-esteem in the Science of Mind text? Exactly 0. And I'm like, Ernest, you're not giving me anything. Help me out here. He mentioned humility twice, and that's it. So I picked one of them. So this is from the Science of Mind text, page 368 if you want to look it up. Proud of his divinity and yet humble before the greatness of the whole, Jesus spoke, ... I'm not going to give you the rest of the quote because it doesn't matter. Jesus spoke with authority, right? That's what they teach us. Jesus spoke with the authority of the divine every time. But he spoke from a place of humility, of understanding that he was a part of the divine, not the whole. Now, Ernest may have mentioned self-esteem and humility a lot. Have y'all seen these little books? There's a bunch of them. This thing called You is my favorite. This one's This is Up to You. So if he's going to talk about self-esteem, this is probably where it is. But he wrote a bunch of these little books. Although I don't think he wrote them. I think these are transcribed talks, which is why they're better than the Science of Mind textbook. Did I just say that out loud? Yes, I did. And I meant it. The Science of Mind can be a bit of a slog in the textbook. Go read some of his other books. Trust me on this. If you're having a hard time working your way through the Science of Mind text, go get this thing called You. I can almost promise you that if you asked every Science of Mind minister to name their top 5 books, this thing called You would be in the top 5. All right, so we're going to talk about humility and self-esteem. We've already been talking about it. One of the things that we talk about is, the way we tend to look at life. We tend to look at life as 2 sides of a coin. It's this or that, this or that. It's black or white. Now, I have an amazing partner. I told you that last week, right? So we were in the park on yesterday, and he says, so tell me what you're talking about tomorrow. And so I start working my way through it. And we're talking about this idea of black and white. And he pointed out that a lot of people who have that black and white mindset are not very compassionate. And I went, oh, I'd never thought about it that way. And here's where I like to use the phrase, we live in shades of gray. Okay? Now, there was an anthropologist named Clifford Geertz. And he had a definite impact on me. Now, my undergraduate degree is in archaeology, but archaeology is a subfield of anthropology. And I read a whole lot of Clifford Geertz. And that's where I got that idea from, that we live in shades of gray. It was in one of his essays. Now, he was a symbolic anthropologist. He was like big into symbols. So I'm going to quote him for you just really quickly. The function of culture is to impose meaning on the world and make it understandable. Is that not what we try and do every day? We wake up, we open our eyes, we look around at the world, and we go, what does this mean? Things happen, and we go, what does this mean? Do you know how many meanings there are in the world? For just anything? How many people are there in the world? We all have our own perceptions, our own ideas. So there's this concept that we have a tendency to live with called either or. But it goes back to that black and white. It can be either this thing or it can be that thing. Well, life isn't like that. Life is, as we like to say, a spectrum. Kind of like light. Light is a spectrum. Life is a spectrum. Everything is a spectrum or a continuum. So our goal is to find a healthy balance in whatever it is that we're working on. It's not either or. It is not black or white. I did say shades of gray, but then I said, well, if life's a spectrum, well, what's a good visual analogy of a spectrum? A rainbow. And then the rainbow reminded me of one other thing. There's a whole lot of spectrums of light that we can't see. So we want to give each other some grace. Because maybe you're seeing a light that I don't see. Maybe I'm seeing a light that you don't see. So as we're moving along this spectrum and finding this healthy balance, you want to know what image came to my mind? That awful scale in the doctor's office. Uh-huh. Yeah, none of us like that scale. I always take my shoes off. It doesn't help. But when I was in ministerial school, I learned this new idea, not either or, both and. I was in a class, and Reverend Patrick said both and. I darn near lost my mind. I went, wait, what? What is this? What is both and? You mean I can have both? I can have both, and I can have more. So that's the good thing about self-esteem and humility. And in fact, I have this whole slew of quotes that I may or may not use, which is why I gave them to Danielle. It's like, just in case. One of the quotes said, humility is often a trait associated with those who actually have high self-esteem and high confidence. The reason for this is simple. By being secure in yourself and your achievements, you do not need to put on a show to impress others. Both and. That's from Lee. I don't even know if I can pronounce that last name. Nailalingamham. Yeah, that wasn't even close, I'm sure. I should have practiced that in the mirror a couple of times before I tried to say it live, right? So self-esteem is knowing that we are made of God's stuff. And humility is knowing that we are but a tiny sliver. If you break us down into our most fundamental parts, we can talk about molecules. We can talk about electrons, neutrons. We can talk about photons. You should go see the single photon theory. You want to blow your mind? Ooh, quantum physics. We're all made of the same stuff. If we're all made of the same stuff, then we're all made of God's stuff. The power that we use in our life all of the time to do whatever it is that we do, that creativity, that joy, that peace, that's God's power. So self-esteem is knowing that the power that we use is God's power. And humility is knowing that we only hold a tiny little bit of it at a time. Knowing that we are beloved expressions of the divine. And that everybody else is too. We are electrons dancing. When I heard that, I was like, oh, that is really cool. Now I'm going to circle back to the it's all God stuff. Okay? Just because I think we get used to living in this world and we forget that it's all God stuff. It's easy to look at our fellow godlings, look in their eyes, and see God looking back at us. It might be mostly easy to look at every living being and see God looking back at us. I'm talking about the cats and the dogs and the cows and the spiders. They got 8 of them, so, they got plenty of eyes to look back at. But have you considered that the chair you're sitting in is God's stuff? The book that I'm waving around up here, that's God's stuff. It should occasionally rock us back on our heels when we look around at the world, both animate and inanimate. It is all God's stuff. And I don't say that to make us feel small. I say that to remind us to tread carefully, to make good decisions, to treat each other and everything kindly, compassionately, lovingly. The good news about us living on a spectrum and finding that healthy balance is because we live on a spectrum, we are capable of growth and change. And occasionally, we do get snatched up or rocked back on our heels, as I like to say. And the world shows us something and we go, oh yeah. We forget who we are. And it's okay. Because we have each other to remind. I want to remind you, because we're talking about self-esteem, right? You know what the difference between selfishness and self-care is? Selfishness is putting your needs above others. No, hang on. Putting your wants above others' needs. There it is. Self-care is putting your needs above others' wants. Okay? Self-esteem is part of that. Self-esteem is a gift to remember who you are. I have one more point, but I think I'm going to get over here. I want to give you some of these quotes because they're so good. So good. Humility is not thinking less of yourself. Humility is thinking of yourself less. We can be courageous and contrite at the same time. I'm going to say it's Chris Hodges. You don't know who he is. Too many people these days mistake humility for weakness, when the ability to remain humble in today's self-centered world is actually a gift. That's T.W. Lawless. That's a cool name. Lawless. A bird sitting in a tree is never afraid of the branch breaking because its trust is not in the branch but in its own wings. I love that. That's one of my favorite quotes. That's attributed to Charlie Wardle. I didn't know that. When we feel connected to our spiritual source, we live effectively, love well, and give back to life. That's the theme this month. That's why we're looking at these contrasts. That's why we're looking at what is self-esteem and why should I have it? You know how Emma says there's good in this world and you should have it? Well, self-esteem is that good. There is good in this world and you should have it. You should have a good self-esteem. You should trust in your wings. And all humility asks you to do is remember whose you are. Self-esteem is who you are. Humility is whose you are. There was one more little thing about humility, and it was the phrase authentic rather than performative. Okay? All right? Because practitioners and ministers do perform. Okay? This is not a performance, but we do perform our duties. We do pray out loud for you. But when we do it, we're coming from a place of authenticity. So when you're looking at the difference between self-esteem and humility, you want to make sure that you are coming from a place of authentically you, authentically spirit. What is the essence of Lisa? I want to tell you that the essence of Lisa is a kind, compassionate, loving heart with a little bit of a temper. That's authentic. That's not performative. And that is why when practitioners pray for you, there's two things about it that you want to remember. Practitioners are treating themselves. They are not treating you. They are not healing you. They are holding the space for healing to come to you. But that's on you. You got to be willing to accept it. We are revealing the truth, not creating it. Okay? All right, I'm going to go through these really quick. Make sure I didn't leave anything good out. Oh, yeah, there was one last little quote that I might give you here. Okay. Because I've talked a lot about continuum and spectrum and what have you. But when I was looking up, I swear that there is this really amazing Alan Watts quote about spectrums, and I could not find it. But instead, I found this one from Mae Jemison. The difference between science and the arts is not that they are different sides of the same coin, or even different parts of the same continuum, but rather they are manifestations of the same thing. The arts and sciences are avatars of human creativity. Okay, so if I substituted the words self-esteem and humility in that, the difference between self-esteem and humility is not that they are two sides of the same coin, even, or different parts of the same continuum, but rather they are manifestations of the same thing. Self-esteem and humility are avatars of God's creativity that we get to have as divine expressions of that. Now, I've talked about whose we are. This poem came up in my memories on Facebook. So this is what I'm going to leave you with. A wonderful poet named Nikita Gill. 93% stardust. After Carl Sagan, who gave her hope as a child. We have calcium in our bones, iron in our veins, carbon in our souls, and nitrogen in our brains. 93% stardust, with souls made of flames. We are just stars that have people names. And now I'm sure that they're going to have an amazing song for you.
No, really. What I was going to say was, we appreciate everything all of you do, whether it's monetary donations, whether it's your time, it's actually doing things like decorating at the center. We appreciate everything everybody does here. So in gratitude, let's just say with me, as you take your gift in your hand, either physically or in your mind, divine love through me blesses and multiplies all the good I am and have, all the good I give and receive. I am prosperous now, and so it is. So as we come to the end of our time together today, and before we do a spiritual mind treatment, I just want to take the theme from your song there, the fire. The fire burning within you, in my interpretation, is love. If you were to describe God, the all, the ground of all being, the divine, in one word, it would simply be love. And we need a lot more love in this world. If we all operated from this love, then by nature we would have the humility to move around. But we would also have the self-confidence to do whatever it needs to be done to actually repair the fabric of the universe, which is tikkun olam in Judaic thinking. So our way of praying is called spiritual mind treatment or affirmative prayer, and it goes something like this. There is one in this whole universe. There is simply one. And that one expresses itself in many, many ways. It expresses itself in the planets, the stars. It expresses itself in life in general. It expresses itself in all the creatures on this planet. It expresses itself in each and every single human being. It expresses itself in me. It expresses itself in everyone here present in the room and online. And because there is only one, and that power flows through me, it flows through all things, I can claim that power. And in my claiming of that power, I claim for each and every single person here, and every single person on this planet, I claim the spark of love is growing more intensely each day. From a very tiny beginning, it's moving outward. And I can see this, I can feel it, and I know it. And because I know this, I know that ultimately on this planet, peace, joy, and love will prevail. Compassion will be the way of life. And in this knowingness and in gratitude for this, I release this word into that divine law that has no choice but to say yes, and so it is.
Say it with me now. Something wonderful is happening through me.
Something wonderful is happening through me.
I feel it in my body.
I feel it in my body.
I feel it in my mind.
I feel it in my mind.
I feel it in everything I am.
I feel it in everything I am.
I choose it.
I choose it.
I trust it.
I trust it.
I use it.
I use it.
And I love it.
And I love it.
And so it is.
And so it is.